Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, October 24th, 2025. President Donald Trump gets ready to fly to Southeast Asia for meetings with leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, and a one-on-one meeting with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. We'll talk about it with Politico's trade reporter Ari Hawkins. President Trump ends trade negotiations with Canada after Ontario's government runs a TV ad with former President Ronald Reagan expressing opposition to tariffs. Inflation report from the Labor Department. The Consumer Price Index rose in September at an annual rate of 3%, the highest since last January. U.S. government shutdown is now on day 24. The House and Senate are not in session today. Over 600,000 civilian federal workers missing their first full paychecks. Plus, bipartisan warnings about the government shutdown putting in jeopardy SNAP food assistance that over 40 million Americans receive. We'll talk about that with The Hill's senior staff writer Mike Lillis. New York's Attorney General Letitia James pleads not guilty in federal court in Norfolk, Virginia to charges of mortgage fraud, lying on a bank loan application to get a better interest rate. Outside the courthouse, she said, "I have this belief in the justice system and the rule of law. There is no fear. This is not about me. This is about all of us and a weaponized justice system." The Pentagon says the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford is being deployed to the Caribbean Sea to support military operations against drug traffickers. And there was another strike today on a small boat. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said 6 male narco-terrorists were killed. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio visits the Operations Center in Israel. That's the headquarters of the U.S.-led effort to maintain the Israel-Hamas ceasefire and to plan for rebuilding and securing Gaza. Reuters writing that U.S. President Donald Trump will test his deal-making prowess in a region battered by his hardball trade policies on a trip to Asia next week, as doubts hang over his highly anticipated meeting with China's Xi Jinping. Trump, who leaves Washington on Friday night, is set for a 5-day trip spanning Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea, his first to the region, and his longest journey abroad since taking office in January. That was from Reuters. President Trump spoke about the trip Thursday as he was answering a reporter's question at the White House about illegal drug smuggling.
Is there any evidence that China is now smuggling fentanyl through Venezuela to bypass U.S. and Mexican port controls?
They are doing that, yes. But they are paying right now a 20% tariff because of fentanyl. That's billions and billions of dollars that they're paying. We're actually, on November 1st, the tariff on China goes to 157%. Which is record-setting territory, and we don't want that because it's not sustainable for them. They can't sustain that. We don't want them to have to go through that. So I'm meeting with President Xi, and I would say we have some big issues, like with the farmers and various other things, but the first question I'm going to be asking him about is fentanyl. I'm putting it right at the front of the list. So they pay a very big penalty for doing that. And I don't think they want to be doing it, and we'll see what happens at the end of next week.
Joining us now to talk about President Trump's trip to Southeast Asia is Ari Hawkins, Politico trade reporter. Thanks for being with us. The very first line of your article at Politico.com says that this is the riskiest foreign trip of his second term. Why is that?
That's right. And there's quite a lot on the table during this event. There's a span of 3 different countries across Asia. There's a huge focus right now on this meeting with the Chinese president on the 30th. There's a lot of anticipation for it, particularly because there is a looming deadline that could see the return of major sweeping tariffs on both sides that would effectively cut off trade. The low-hanging fruit of this trip is that it is critical for Trump to find some type of way to level set, to bring relations with China onto a more manageable path to move forward. But at the same time, there's lots of other leaders sitting down. And if we remember here, part of the Trump administration's strategy was to peel economies away from China's economic orbit with these trade deals. That's why it's so critical to nail down agreements with countries like Malaysia and Cambodia and other economies in China's orbit.
What is the latest on the meeting between Presidents Trump and Xi? We've heard it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off.
It's expected that the leaders will meet. If you look into some of the rhetoric from senior Trump administration officials, they are sort of offering up this possibility that things will still fall through. It's not clear how well-oriented this is or how long it's going to be. And it is possible that one side or the other at the last second just kind of disregards it. That's what Trump is trying to cover here when we see phrases indicating that it may not happen. For now, it's on the president's schedule. They are expected to sit down unless there is another major hangup that happens between then, which is entirely possible under this president.
Do we know what the agenda is going to be? Is President Trump indicated what issues he wants to bring up with China, I guess besides the tariffs, if there are others? And also, has China said what they want to talk about?
So the president did give a little bit of a laundry list of key issues that he wants to bring up. Chief among them is China's restrictions on rare earth exports. Those are critical items that are used to power most electronics in the U.S., which doesn't have the refining capacity that's anywhere akin to China. So that turning that on again, having China roll back some of those restrictions will be key. That's one of the things that he's mentioned. He's also mentioned soybean purchases. China has decreased the amount that they are purchasing, particularly from the U.S., and is exploring other markets, trying to maintain that status quo, get things back on the right track before that decision from China is also been mentioned. For China, they have been much quieter about this and actually hadn't even confirmed it until much more recently. But they are going to, again, try to maintain a level of trade between the countries, which means making sure that those triple-digit tariffs that both sides imposed during the spring does not return, finding some kind of longer-term agreement or delay to make sure that those tariffs stay.
We're talking with Ari Hawkins, Politico's trade reporter. What pressure is President Trump facing from U.S. constituencies, especially his own party, the Republicans, about issues involved in this trip?
Well, we can see that there's been a bit of an uptick in the amount of criticism Trump has received from Republicans in response to his tariff policies. China is the primary sort of focus of Trump's tariff policies. It's the second largest economy and the largest trading partner for the U.S. So any major tariffs that disrupt two-way trade on that means that everybody in the business community and very quickly the average consumer will start to feel that. Trump is facing pressure from his own party, from his constituents, to find some kind of off-ramp with China. That's what's going to be critical here.
Also, this trip is coming as the U.S. government shutdown is ongoing. What does that mean, if anything?
That's right. So most of the trade functionalities Trump has shielded from the most significant effects of the shutdown. For instance, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative actually did not furlough a single person despite the shutdown, although, of course, that is a smaller office. And we can see Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has indicated that it's been weighing on negotiations a bit. So while there is still staff there, we can see that the sort of day-to-day process of Washington, reading these different reports before they're granted approval, all of those issues that are more in the weeds, that all could be slowing down. And there's likely less people going on this trip as a result.
And finally, this is the first trip by President Trump to Southeast Asia since his first term. What's changed? What's the same?
What's changed here is that while a lot of the economies were slapped with higher tariffs back during the April 2nd so-called Liberation Day, I would say now that the ball is more in the U.S.'s court in terms of navigating this relationship and making sure that these deals have enough concessions to countries like Malaysia and Cambodia to actually get those countries to agree to them. This is part of his China strategy here, to get these countries to sign deals with the U.S. so that they are peeled away from China's economic orbit. That means there's a level of pressure for him to get deals signed with those specific countries in a way that really wasn't there in months past as the U.S.-China economic relationship starts to straggle a little more.
Ari Hawkins, Politico's trade reporter. He writes Politico Pro's daily trade policy newsletter, Morning Trade. And you can find him on X @_Ari Hawkins. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
President Trump announced Thursday night that he is terminating all trade negotiations with Canada because of a TV ad that the province of Ontario is airing using portions of a radio address from former President Ronald Reagan in 1987 about tariffs. President Trump posting on Truth Social today, Canada cheated and got caught. They fraudulently took a big buy ad saying that Ronald Reagan did not like tariffs when actually he loved tariffs for our country and its national security. Canada is trying to illegally influence the United States Supreme Court in one of the most important rulings in the history of our country. Part of the post today from President Trump. Here is a bit of the 1-minute ad.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs.
Ronald Reagan Foundation putting out a statement saying that ad misrepresents Reagan's address, and Ontario's government created an ad campaign against tariffs using selective audio and video, and that Ontario did not seek nor receive permission to use and edit the remarks, and the Reagan Foundation is reviewing legal options. New York Times writing about this. In the 1987 radio address, Mr. Reagan was warning Congress not to pass protectionist trade legislation against Japan as he prepared to meet with that country's prime minister. Mr. Reagan had himself just imposed high tariffs on Japanese electronics over what he called unfair trade practices by Tokyo, but he said that those tariffs were an example of certain select cases and used much of the 5-minute address to warn about the pitfalls of protectionism in general terms. That was from the New York Times. The White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett was asked about this today in the White House driveway.
On Canada, you said the president was frustrated, but is this just a knee-jerk reaction?
I think the frustration has built up over time. I've been involved in some of these negotiations, and the Canadians have been very difficult to negotiate with. And you look at all the countries around the world that we've made deals with, and the fact that we're now negotiating with Mexico separately reveals that it's not just about one ad, that there's frustration that's built up.
And is he planning to speak with the Prime Minister Carney when they're both in Asia this week? Because this ad had nothing to do with Carney's government.
I don't have any information on that.
Mr. Hassett, how concerned is the administration that the Supreme Court will not ultimately side with your view on the tariff policy? The president has been truthing a lot about the upcoming case.
I think that we have a very high level of confidence that the Supreme Court will side with us. We think we're on very strong grounds. I've been fishing through the briefs myself just to see what the arguments are, and I think that the case is very, very strong, and we're highly confident that they'll side with us. I even spoke in the Oval with the president about it last night, and I say the level of confidence is extremely high.
Mr. Hassett, just very quickly, what it has been so challenging about dealing with Canada in trade negotiations?
I guess the lack of flexibility, and also I would guess that leftover behaviors from like the Trudeau folks that can be very frustrating for people who are negotiating.
Kevin Hassett is the National Economic Council Director at the White House, speaking to reporters in the White House driveway. By the way, the Supreme Court case that does challenge President Donald Trump's emergency tariff powers is scheduled for oral argument before the Supreme Court on November 5th. We'll have live coverage on the C-SPAN networks. About that ad using the radio address from 1987, former President Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs, Ontario Premier Doug Ford spoke on October 14th at the Empire Club of Canada in Toronto on why they were putting together that ad.
Let's take Ronald Reagan's words and let's blast it to the American people. And our first launch is going to be on every major network. Maybe one may not get it, and we'll talk about that at a later date. No, it's actually CNN, to be honest with you. They're a little nervous, but Fox and other people, but we're going to launch a $75 million ad, and we're going to repeat that message to every Republican district there is, right across the entire country. And we're just gonna speak the truth. But you know, that ad, it's not a nasty ad. It's actually just very factual, and coming from a person like Ronald Reagan, every Republican is going to identify that voice. Maybe the younger Republicans can't remember, but he was just the best president the country's ever seen, in my opinion. In fact, factory employment in America is at the lowest level it's been in 5 years. This next one is staggering. The Center for Automotive Research in the U.S. says that President Trump's tariffs on autos will raise the costs for American automakers by nearly $108 billion in 2025. These kinds of enormous costs on businesses result in two outcomes: higher prices for American consumers and fewer jobs for American workers, and inflation on the backs of American workers.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford on October 14th at the Empire Club of Canada in Toronto, talking about the ad that did run involving former President Ronald Reagan's voice, talking about tariffs that led to President Donald Trump last night saying that all trade negotiations between the U.S. and Canada have been called off. The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke to reporters today about Canada-U.S. trade as he boarded a plane in Ottawa to fly to the ASEAN conference in Asia.
For months, we have stressed the importance of distinguishing things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees. And it's in that context that our officials, my colleagues, have been working with their American colleagues on detailed, constructive negotiations, discussions on specific transactions, specific sectors, steel, aluminum, and energy. And a lot of progress has been made. And we stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions, because it will be for the benefit of workers in the United States, workers in Canada, and families in both of our countries. Now, what we can control, absolutely, is how we build here at home. And that's the focus of Budget 2025, generational investment here in Canada. And what we can also control, or at least heavily influence, is developing new partnerships and opportunities, including with the economic giants of Asia, which is the focus of this trip.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking to reporters at the airport in Ottawa. After he made that statement in English, he repeated it in French and then turned and boarded the plane as reporters were trying to ask him about the ad run by Ontario's government using Ronald Reagan's sound bites on tariffs.
Merci beaucoup.
President Trump continuing today to post on Truth Social about tariffs, writing in all caps, the stock market is stronger than ever before because of tariffs, and the United States is wealthy, powerful, and nationally secure again, all because of tariffs. The most important case ever is in the United States Supreme Court. God bless America. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, putting out a statement. Americans cannot afford Donald Trump's price-spiking tariff temper tantrums. These constant tantrums end up costing Americans real money. Refusing to negotiate with Canada to alleviate the tariffs will ensure that Americans continue to pay an average of $1,300 due to higher prices on everything from lumber to beef. The madness must stop. And Senator Schumer also said in the statement he would force votes next week on proposals to reverse Donald Trump's damaging tariffs on Canada and other countries. Wall Street today, the Dow up 472, NASDAQ up 263, S&P up 53. CNN writing the September CPI inflation report showed that prices rose at a slower than expected rate of 0.3% last month, but annual price hikes for a range of consumer goods rose at the fastest pace so far this year. Wall Street rallied after the data release, as it likely cements another rate cut from the Federal Reserve at its meeting next week. This is the first and only piece of official economic data the federal government has released this month due to the government shutdown. The White House said Friday the October inflation report likely would not be released at all. That was from CNN. The White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett was asked about the inflation report today as he spoke to reporters in the White House driveway.
Your assessment of the latest inflation numbers, CPI numbers, 3%.
The inflation numbers were fantastic. 48 Bloomberg economists got it wrong. It was the core was down relative to August and down relative to expectation. And the top line number actually was inflated because there was a shutdown of a refinery in Indiana that made gas prices go up a lot in September, but we've seen those have already come down, so we're highly confident that the next number will even be below this. And that's really, it's important to think about the theory of why this happens. It's not just about the numbers, right? So what happened was we got the worst inflation spike that we've had in our lifetimes because President Biden and his team had runaway spending, runaway deficit spending. I'm here to tell you that we just ran the numbers getting the monthly Treasury statement, and the deficit this year is going to be about $600 billion lower than it was last year. And that $600 billion decline is about equal, $200 billion of it is lower discretionary spending. And so because of that, there's less inflationary force pushing prices up. And so normal macroeconomics got it right when we said that Biden was going to cause inflation, and we're using it now to get it back under control.
Kevin Hassett is director of the National Economic Council at the White House, speaking to reporters in the White House driveway. Story from CNBC, the Social Security cost of living adjustment will be 2.8% in 2026. The Social Security Administration said on Friday Social Security retirement benefits will increase by about $56 per month on average starting in January, according to the agency. The cost of living adjustment, or COLA, provides an annual adjustment to both Social Security and supplemental security income to help ensure those benefits keep up with inflation. About 75 million people received benefit checks from those programs in August, according to the Social Security Administration. That was from CNBC. In the U.S. Capitol building today, the U.S. House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, spoke about the inflation report and the federal government shutdown, which has now hit day 24.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Today's inflation numbers of 3% year over year confirm what hardworking American taxpayers already know, that Donald Trump and Republican policies are making life too expensive in the United States of America. Donald Trump and Republicans promise that costs will go down on day one, but costs haven't gone down in the United States of America. Costs are going up. Inflation is up, the highest number since January of this year. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Electricity bills are through the roof. And now, because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of Americans are receiving notices right now that their health care premiums are about to skyrocket. In some instances, everyday Americans are going to pay $1,000 or $2,000 more per month. That is unsustainable in an environment where people are already struggling to live paycheck to paycheck, can't thrive, and can barely survive. We need House Republicans to come back to Washington, D.C. End your 4-week vacation. Enough already. We as Democrats, House Democrats, Senate Democrats, are ready to sit down anytime, any place with anyone here at the Capitol or over at the White House to negotiate a bipartisan agreement, reopen the government so we can pay our hard-working federal employees, while at the same time, we need to decisively address the Republican health care crisis. It's crushing people all across the country. Meanwhile, Donald Trump and Republicans on Capitol Hill are nowhere to be found, have zero interest in actually addressing this issue. That's a shame.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a news conference in the U.S. Capitol. The House and Senate were not in session today, so the government shutdown most likely will extend through at least Monday. That would be day 27. Republican Congressman Mike Karadopoulos of Florida was on C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program to talk about the government shutdown.
How many federal workers do you represent? What are you hearing from them?
We're hearing from a bunch of them, of course. I represent Kennedy Space Center, and so you can imagine how important it is to our country. We have to win this new space race. We're excited about the fact that Artemis 2 will go around the moon for the first time since 1972. These folks are working today without pay. We give them a lot of credit for doing so. We're optimistic, like myself, who voted for keeping the government open. They want to see the government back open and get their back pay, and more importantly, make sure we keep the mission of the government in place. As a former history teacher, I think it's essential we do just that.
For those federal workers in your district at Kennedy Space Center, should your leader, the Speaker Johnson, call back yourself and your colleagues to Washington and vote on legislation to pay them while they are working during this government shutdown?
Well, the great news is we did just that. We voted yes, and as you know, I'm a former history teacher, and I remember as a kid growing up watching Schoolhouse Rock. We in the House did our work. We sent it over to the Senate, and for those, I was listening to some of the listeners before and callers today before I walked on the set, and as you know, it takes 60 votes to break the debate in the House, in the Senate, and so we're waiting. We can't negotiate against ourselves. We already sent this over there, a clean CR. Of course, the Democrats did that 13 times in the Biden years, and as a person who's back into politics after being the leader in the Senate back in Florida, it's really frustrating to see this hyper-partisanship in place because I thought a clean CR was just that. We thought by offering that clean CR, and the other thing that a lot of people don't know, we also went to the Democrats before this whole mess began and say, let's have a clean CR, and what date do you want? We want to go to January. They said November 21. We said, okay, fine, November 21. Yet, here we are today, 24 days into the shutdown, and no one's winning because the American public is losing, in my opinion.
Democrats point to the 60-vote threshold. You need that in the Senate in order to advance any legislation. They say that's why Republicans need to come to the table with us, and they need to compromise. We're saying if you want our votes, you need to do something about these ACA tax credits and return money to the Medicaid program.
Well, first and foremost, the idea is that you have to have the government open to have a lot of these negotiations. Let's do it in the open eye. And I think beyond that is the sense of we passed these Medicaid changes because there was waste, fraud, and abuse in the system. You saw we had this big debate, of course, illegal immigration, but also this case of people did not tell the truth on their application for Medicaid. We want to make sure those income checks are put in place. And also, if you're able-bodied, you should not be on Medicaid. And finally, people are paying $1,500, $2,000 a month for health care, almost $25,000 a year. And yet other people are gaming the system. So we wanted to make those changes. And so also your viewers are clear, these changes don't take effect until 2027. So these Medicaid changes have not taken place yet because we wanted to reform the system. We want to make sure that people have a ramp to understand what's going on, how you qualify to stay on, or if you don't qualify anymore, how to get into new programs.
Congressman Mike Herodopoulos, Republican of Florida, on C-SPAN's morning program, The Washington Journal, this morning. And House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, has announced the House will be out again next week for legislative business. That's October 27th through November 2nd. That means no votes will be held for a sixth consecutive week in the House. A story from Axios about 658,000 civilian employees at the Departments of Defense, Health and Human Services, and Veterans Affairs missed their first full paycheck on Friday, marking the latest grim milestone of the government shutdown that has no end in sight. The Executive Office of the President and a few other agencies' civilian employees also missed Friday paychecks, according to a Bipartisan Policy Institute report. That was from Axios. More on the government shutdown with a closer look at air travel and food assistance when Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Reuters reporting from Philadelphia that U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned Friday that more flight delays may occur in the coming days as air traffic controllers are set to miss their first paycheck as a government shutdown enters its 24th day. Duffy said the Federal Aviation Administration's Air Traffic Controller Academy will, in the coming weeks, run out of money to pay air traffic control students. About 6.6% of flights delayed Thursday were due to air traffic controller absences, slightly above the normal 5%, but much lower than the 53% seen on prior days during the shutdown. Transportation Department said. Duffy said he was concerned as the holiday season approaches, there is more flight travel that could lead to more delays. Secretary Duffy briefed reporters at the Philadelphia International Airport.
As you all know, we're going through a shutdown right now, and in that shutdown, government employees don't get paid. And what I think is critical, especially for us at DOT, is that our air traffic controllers aren't going to get paid during the shutdown. And so just to give you guys a little history, they were paid about 10 days ago. And in that paycheck, they got 90% of their pay because most of that pay period fell into September. But they just got notice yesterday on what their pay is going to be for this coming Tuesday. And they got notice that their paycheck is going to be a big fat zero. And so as I've traveled around to talk to the controllers, there's great frustration. There's anxiety because as any one of you look at the expectation that a paycheck comes in and then you plan for that. And you pay your mortgage, you pay your car payment, you put food on the table. As these controllers come to work, they have to pay for babysitters, child care. There's a whole host of bills that Americans have that they anticipate that paycheck is going to come in so they can meet those bills. And the stress level that our controllers are under right now, I think, is unacceptable. Now, I want to be clear. There'll be a question about, is the system safe? And I would say, yes, it is safe, because if we don't have enough controllers, if we have controllers that are more stressed and less able to do the job, we pay close attention to that, and we will reduce the capacity of airplanes taking off and landing, or we will cancel flights. And so you can and very well may see delays in the system, but that's because our priority is you getting from point A to point B and getting there safely. I'm less concerned about you getting there on time. I want you to be safe.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy at the Philadelphia International Airport. Mike Lillis, The Hill's senior staff writer, reports at thehill.com. The battle over food stamps has emerged as the latest flashpoint in the fierce partisan clash over government spending. He joins us now on the phone. Thanks for being with us. Why a flashpoint?
Well, for one thing, it's a huge program. It's 42 million people who are on this. It's the largest federal program for nutrition, for food, for grocery subsidies. It helps a lot of people with their grocery bills every month. And so just the sheer numbers mean that the effects of the shutdown are going to reverberate broadly through the country. That's kind of the popular appeal of focusing on this issue. The timely appeal is that the benefits have been going out through the month of October, even during the shutdown, but they're drying up quickly as we reach the end of the month, and there's real confusion about what's going to happen on November 1st. There is a contingency fund. Congress every year steps in and provides about $3 billion a year in contingency. But because of the way the program functions, they can roll some over. So they're sitting on about between $5 and $6 billion of contingency funds, which is not enough to pay $8 billion for November, but it's enough to pay a lot of it. The real wild card here, the real question is about November 1st is, will the Department of Agriculture, which is the agency that runs the food stamp program, the SNAP program, are they going to tap into that contingency fund to pay these benefits? And Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of the USDA, has suggested that they will not. She has suggested that it's up to the Senate Democrats to reopen the government if they want those funds to flow, which is an unusual scenario because in past shutdowns, it's kind of been not a question at all. It's kind of been a no-brainer that the contingency fund would be released because that was Congress's intention. They allotted that money for emergency situations exactly like shutdowns. So for the Agriculture Secretary to threaten to withhold them, of course, you can imagine is not very popular among the SNAP advocacy groups and the Democrats up here on Capitol Hill who want that money released. So the practical effect of that is you're already seeing a lot of states saying that they are not going to pay any benefits after November 1st. And at least one of those states has indicated that it's because the USDA told them directly that there would be no funds forthcoming from Washington. So we're right at this kind of inflection point where the shutdown is going to really have a lot of impact on real people outside of the Beltway, where I'm not sure that has been the case before.
During the news conferences that we have seen each day of the shutdown, the food aid, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, seems to come up. How are the Republicans and the Democrats and the White House and you mentioned the Agriculture Department positioning what's about to happen?
Well, that's a great question. And of course, as you're watching these dueling daily press conferences, and they've been going on now for more than 3 weeks, you're exactly right. The issue of SNAP has come up increasingly here as we get closer to November 1st. Now it's a daily thing. And both sides are pointing fingers at the other. It's the most kind of predictable Washington moment you can have, right, where they're both blaming each other for the shutdown, and therefore the other for the looming SNAP cuts. So what Republicans are saying is we've got this clean spending bill. Senate Democrats had approved it in March. It's the same levels of spending. Why isn't Chuck Schumer just reopening the government? That would get all this SNAP money going. It would get all the furloughed employees in Washington back to work. It would pay the military, et cetera, et cetera. They're saying that the way to get the SNAP payments out is reopen the government broadly. Democrats are saying we can't do that because of the health care subsidies to Obamacare. That's their big kind of inflection point. But they're also pointing out that Republicans over the summer, when they passed Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, had cut the SNAP program significantly. It's the largest cut to SNAP in the history of the country. It was a $186 billion cut over 10 years. And so they're saying, hey, wait a minute. When did Republicans become the champion of welfare programs, of nutrition programs, when in fact just a couple months ago they slashed this program so significantly? So they're saying that the Republicans are hypocrites now for even bringing up the topic at all. So it's the blame game. It's very inside the Beltway, very, very Washington. But again, as I said, it's going to begin reverberating outside of Washington as these benefits do not go out on November 1st, we think, unless the USDA has a change of heart, unless the pressure builds. And I should mention that the pressure is building from both parties. Just this week, you had Josh Hawley, a very conservative Republican senator from Missouri, who introduced a bill to pay SNAP benefits during the shutdown. And Marianne Miller Meeks, another conservative from Iowa, is releasing a similar bill today. So Republicans are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, we can't let these benefits not go out. They affect our constituents. They affect red states, blue states. This is not a partisan issue, and we need to get these benefits out the door. So you're starting to see some legislation on that front. Whether or not either chamber would bring it to the floor, or if it could pass, if it got to the floor, is another question. There have been piecemeal bills that have come to the floor during the shutdown, and they've all failed. So we don't know the fate of those bills, but they are starting to get a lot of attention as the issue is kind of rises to the forefront of this debate.
And do you know if President Trump has commented on this yet?
He has not. It's, that I know of. Don't hold me to that. He makes a lot of. Has a lot of press interactions, and I don't catch everything. But it's through Secretary Rollins that we're getting most of the information about SNAP and the intention of the administration. Trump had campaigned on a platform of we want to keep a lot of these benefits in place. He focused on Medicaid specifically, and so. I think it's probably safe to say that he would side with the USDA and say we want these benefits to go out, but it's the Democrats who are holding them up. And if they want to, if they want them to go out the door, then they have to reopen the government with a broad spending bill, not some kind of piecemeal approach. But that's the latest I've heard from him. He's just kind of been on the sidelines of the shutdown debate, which is another interesting element of this whole fight. Usually the president is very involved, and he's been more focused on foreign policy issues over these weeks. And a lot of people think that the impasse will last as long as he remains on the sidelines, that he's going to have to get involved if anything is going to give. So he is an enormous part of this debate, but I have not heard him weigh in specifically on SNAP.
Mike Lillis, senior staff writer with The Hill. Find his articles at thehill.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
And Axios is reporting the Agriculture Department says it can't use contingency funds to pay for food stamps during the government shutdown, and that states won't be reimbursed if they cover the expenses on their own, according to a new memo obtained by Axios. This is Washington Today. New York Attorney General Letitia James begins an AP article accused the Trump administration of using the justice system as a tool of revenge after she pleaded not guilty Friday in a federal mortgage fraud case the president pressed the Justice Department to bring. James's first court appearance in Virginia sets the stage for a high-stakes legal battle between the Republican administration and a longtime Democratic Trump foe who angered him with a major civil fraud case she brought against him. She's accused of lying on mortgage papers to get favorable loan terms when purchasing a modest house in Norfolk, where she has family. That was from Associated Press, and Letitia James spoke outside the federal courthouse in Norfolk, Virginia.
I want to thank each and every one of you. I want to thank you for your prayers. I want to thank you for your emails. I want to thank you for your support. It has strengthened my spirit and it has anchored my soul, and so I want to thank you. But this is not about me. This is about all of us, and about a justice system which has been weaponized. A justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge. This justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge and a weapon against those individuals who simply did their job and who stood up for the rule of law. And a justice system which unfortunately is nothing being used as a vehicle of retribution. But my faith is strong. And my faith is, I have this belief in the justice system, in the rule of law, and I have a belief in America and all of its individuals who have stood with me, not only in New York, but all across this nation. I've heard from just about every jurisdiction in this nation who have said, stand up and be tall. And never, ever cow down or back down or break or bend. So there's no fear today. No fear. No fear. No fear. No fear. Because I believe that justice will rain down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. And I'm here to say that my work and my job and all that I do, all throughout my public career, I've stood up for the rights of New Yorkers and Americans, and I will not be deterred. And I will not be deterred. I will not be distracted. I will do my job each and every day, and that's why I'm headed back to New York, because there's work to be done standing up for the rule of law. God bless you and thank you all, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
New York Attorney General Letitia James, a Democrat, speaking outside the federal courthouse in Norfolk, Virginia, after pleading not guilty to charges of mortgage fraud. More from the Associated Press article. The judge set a trial date for January 26th. And James' attorney, Abby Lowell, told the judge the defense will seek to have the case dismissed, arguing that it's a vindictive prosecution brought at the direction of the president. It's a story from CNN that says prosecutors from the Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office have been hesitant to proceed with charges against Democratic Senator Adam Schiff, a political opponent of President Donald Trump, over allegations of mortgage fraud, but the investigation remains ongoing, multiple sources tell CNN. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Friday, begins a CBS News article, that the U.S. carried out another strike on a vessel allegedly operated by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua that he said was trafficking drugs in the Caribbean Sea. Hegseth said on X that the strike killed all 6 men who were on board and took place in international waters. He said it is the first strike to take place at night. Writing on X, "If you are a narco-terrorist smuggling drugs in our hemisphere, we will treat you like we treat Al-Qaeda. Day or night, we will map your networks, track your people, hunt you down, and kill you." The White House Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller spoke to reporters about this today in the White House driveway.
The USS Trump is considering plans to target cocaine facility and drug trafficking routes inside Venezuela. Can you speak to that? And given that Venezuela is not a cocaine-producing country, can you explain what the plans are there?
Well, so obviously I would not now or ever get into any detailed discussion to address any of the things mentioned in your question in any way. But I do want to address the broader issue of narcotics and the war on cartels and foreign terrorist organizations. So Venezuela, of course, is a central hub for narcotics trafficking across the Western Hemisphere. Also weapons trafficking, also human trafficking as well, too. And we know that the Maduro regime is the Cartel de Sols, which is a recognized and designated narco-trafficking organization, and also Tren de Aragua is a recognized FTO, foreign terrorist organization. And so this is a central hub of terrorist activity across the Western Hemisphere. And just more broadly, as was made clear in the event yesterday, the President of the United States has made clear that narco-terrorists and narco-trafficking is a terrorist activity. These organizations are the ISIS of the Western Hemisphere. They control territory, they field armies, they exert enormous political control over nations and regions and governments and judicial systems through extortion, kidnapping, blackmail, murder, rape. And so we kind of have a situation in the Western Hemisphere where we have large, fully militarized terrorist organizations that, again, control commerce, control travel, control political systems, control the movement of weapons, people, goods, slaves, into the form of human trafficking and sex trafficking, and of course narcotics that are responsible for hundreds of thousands of American dead.
Stephen Miller, White House Homeland Security Advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff, taking reporters' questions in the White House driveway. He referenced an event that President Trump held at the White House on Thursday where this came up. Here's one of those questions.
And Mr. President, if you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. They're going to be like dead. Okay?
President Trump taking reporters' questions at the White House on Thursday. Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, Democrat of California, was interviewed on CNN on Thursday on this.
The Constitution says Congress gets to declare war and peace, and he does not have the legal authority to do this. But even beyond that, this is murder under both international and U.S. domestic law. If you have all of this proof, come show it in a court of law. That's what we do in this country. I represent San Diego, a border community. We've got the land border. We've got the Coast Guard interdicting drug crimes all the time. And there's a process. And that's not just what they do outside, like right off the coast of the United States. It's what they do in the Red Sea when they're trying to get Iranian stuff being smuggled to the Houthis, right? Like there is a process for what you do. You board the ship, you collect evidence, not to mention the fact that you actually want to bring these guys in and prosecute them. One, so we know they're the right people and we're not just killing civilians and fishermen. But two, because actually through that you can learn more about the smuggling process and who you actually need to go after.
Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, Democrat of California, on CNN on Thursday. The story from Fox News today, the Trump administration has ordered the deployment of the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Western Hemisphere as the U.S. continues to target suspected drug smuggling vessels in the Caribbean. From the Washington Post, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Friday that the United States continued to support Israel and was committed to the ceasefire in Gaza, even as the deal has continued to face hurdles, and Israelis have questioned how exactly the deal will be sustained and how much the U.S. administration will dictate Israeli military actions. That was from the Washington Post article. Secretary Rubio held a news conference today at the Civil Military Coordination Center in southern Israel.
You're talking about disarming Hamas. There's been some discussion of a program to buy back weapons.
Well, there's a lot of ideas floating out there.
So
Ultimately,
how seriously is that?
Well, I don't know, but look, there's a lot of ideas out there about that. The bottom line is, you can't have any of the elements of terrorism. You can't have tunnels. You can't have rockets. You can't have anything that threatens Israel's security. I point back to the answer I just gave. If Israel's security is threatened, if 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, Gaza is a place where people who want to destroy Israel are able to operate from with impunity, there's not going to be peace. Everyone knows that. Every country that signed on to this understands that. It is one of the principles that's outlined here. That cannot be the outcome. The outcome needs to be a Gaza where people have jobs and a life and a better future, and people aren't thinking about, how do I kill Israelis, how do I attack Israel? Because if we can't reach that point, then there's not going to be a peace. There's not going to be an enduring peace. You can't be at peace with elements that want to destroy you and kill you and carry out another October 7th. Everyone recognizes that. But there's a lot of work that we need to do to achieve that. We're not there today, 13 days after this deal was signed. But I can tell you we've made more progress in 13 days than anyone thought possible. We've come a long way. This is the first mile in a very long journey. We've got a long ways to go, but we're optimistic that it's heading in the right direction. We are better off today than we were yesterday, and better off yesterday than the day before, but no one is under any illusions. There's a lot of hard work ahead. There'll be bumps along the road. There'll be threats to this peace that emerge that we're going to have to confront, but there are also some exciting opportunities as well that we want to make sure that we are pursuing.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the Civil Military Coordination Center in southern Israel. Associated Press writing about that center. Around 200 U.S. troops are working alongside the Israeli military and delegations from other countries at the center planning the stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza. On Friday, an Associated Press reporter saw international personnel there with flags from Cyprus, Greece, France, Germany, Australia, and Canada. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Remember, tonight, C-SPAN's Ceasefire airs 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. The guests are Senators James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma, and Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware. The host, Dasha Burns, will lead a bipartisan dialogue on the top issues facing the country, including the government shutdown and foreign policy challenges facing the Trump administration. C-SPAN's Ceasefire tonight, 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Have a good night and weekend.